Hey guys, sorry for the delay with finishing off this Motorola project, but before I slide this chassis back into the cabinet, there's a little circuit modification I wanted to try out. See these faint horizontal lines? Those are called retrace lines. Most vintage black and white sets had them to some extent, but they're particularly noticeable on these Motorola sets. Basically, it was a design compromise. Once again, to save money, they cut a few corners. Traditionally, the way you eliminate those lines is you simply crank up the contrast, which does get rid of the lines, but not your picture is awfully harsh to look at. Well, some other restorers out there have done some tinkering and they came up with a simple circuit modification, which I implemented in this set. Basic idea is normally pin 3 on the picture tube is grounded, as is this capacitor here. Well, if you insert a resistor between that point and ground, and then route pin 3 to the junction of that resistor and capacitor, it forms a little bit of a pulse, which blanks out those lines. Well, when I first tried it out, it did blank out those lines, but I created some other interference. So I did some more tinkering, and I found that if I put a diode on here, it got rid of that problem as well. I also needed to tinker around with the resistor value. The original modification called for a 270K. I ended up using a 47K, and it worked out better for me. So I temporarily bypassed my little modification. So if I take this clip out, it's now back in the circuit, and I think you can see now that there are no more of those nasty faint horizontal lines. Alright, now I can finish putting this up back together. Chassis. The chassis sits inside of a base that's just a sheet of aluminum. Has a few holes drilled out that correspond to the mounting points on the chassis, which is one right here. And those are attached to the cabinet with some sheet metal screws and some fender washers, 4 to be exact, that go through these holes down here, so they'll go in like that. When you slide the chassis, you need to be careful with 2 speaker wires, because after you slide this in, you're going to have to reach in and attach those to the speaker terminals up front there. So make sure they aren't snagged on anything as you slide this in. Go. The CRT will fit in right next to this high voltage box here and that tube up there. And while you're sliding it in, you need to make sure that the controls are coming out of the front properly. There we go. Alright. It's a matter of flipping it on its side and lining up these mounting holes. Alright, the chassis is now secured to the cabinet with 4 bolts and washers. The rubber feet on here are reproduction feet I got from Antique Electronics Supply. The original ones had all hardened and shrunk down. These are a perfect match. Alright, so now let's put on the front and the control panel. Okay, now for the front of the cabinet, which is kind of an odd setup. Consists of a piece of plastic that's a speaker grill and faceplate. Before you put this on, make sure you clean the face of the picture tube and the back of this, because once it's on, it's not easy to get at to clean it. Get the whole thing apart again. Alright, so this slides into a channel cut into the top here. So you can slide it back and forth a little bit to make sure it's centered over the picture tube. Like that. And then there's a second piece of wood that has the cutouts for the controls and another groove that locks into the bottom of that piece of plastic. And it goes into a couple slots on the side with metal tabs here. So, like so. And it's held on by a screw on either side that goes into this hole. When you tighten down these screws, you want to push up on the bottom here to apply pressure to this piece of plastic so it won't slide around so much. And now for the last few touches. These screws on the side here are covered up by these nice painted metal caps. Just snap on, like so. And then there's the knobs. The on-off volume knob, if you look closely, has a dot here that indicates the volume level. So you want to make that so when it's off, it's in the bottom left. So when you turn it on, it rotates like that. Likewise, on the channel selector, it has a dot on it that should line up with the numbers. This has a key on it, so it could actually go on one of two ways. And I just happen to know I've got it set over here for channels 3-4. So and there's that. And then the last knob doesn't have a dot, so it doesn't really matter how you put it on. Oh, and these are knurled shafts. Unlike quarter moon shafts, so you can really put them on any way you want. Like so. And finally, there's a fine-tuning knob, which goes on like that. And these fine-tuning knobs are notorious for being hard to find, and I was very lucky to find one at all. But it is a bit routed out inside, and it fits really loosely, so I'm going to have to build that up a little bit. Or actually, now I think about it, since this is splined here, I suppose I can just do this. Alright, well, there we go. Easy as that. Alright, so it only leaves one last bit, but I can't do it right now, and that is the back. Oh, see, there it is. The problem with the back is it has an integral power cord, or I should say it did, which is completely trashed and just hanging on there. I'm going to have to get out a drill or something and drill out these plugs and replace this plug. I used a drill press to drill out the brass rivets so I could remove the old power plug, and that's ready to go on. They would have used steel screws originally, but I like to use brass, so there's no chance of rusting. In particular, I'll be using some of these guys. There we go. One nice solid back. Here's how the cheater cord goes in. It's on there pretty tight. If you were concerned though, you could certainly get a couple new brass rivets, pop them on. Now let's power this guy up. Alright, here we go. Alright.
What was the nature of the charge against you?
Got a nice picture, it's not at a crazy angle. Sounds good. No retrace lines.
Let's see. And what did he say?
So I think I can finally call this project done. Hope you enjoyed this little series of videos on assembling a Motorola VT71. Like I said earlier, this is the first set that I ever restored. Well, not this particular set, but this model. They are fairly plentiful, fairly inexpensive, fairly easy to work on, and plenty of other guys have restored these, and there's lots of info on the internet. So if you have any interest in trying your hand at restoring a vintage TV, I really recommend this particular model.
What were the circumstances surrounding